stars. And what does it say? Mishtachavim li. It doesn't say they bow. Joseph is the speaker. He's telling of his dream. He doesn't say that they bow down to something that symbolizes Joseph. They bowed down to me. That's fascinating. That the first dream is a dream where Joseph remains a symbol. They're bowing to the symbol. You don't even know if it's Joseph. You assume it's Joseph. The second dream, they're bowing down to Joseph. Or let me give you another difference. Maybe, yes, Ruby, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's significant that in the first one it's earthbound. It's here on earth, and the second one is heavenly bound. So we're to interpret it. I think that Joseph is being bound from all sides, not just from the land, not just from the people, but also from the heavens. They're opposites in a way, and yet that he's being bound by both.
It's a great point. But right. I think the dreams are fundamentally, one dream, of course, is earthly, and the other one is heavenly. Excellent.
But
yes,
maybe,
please.
But maybe if Joseph were interpreting them, he would say, since he is the great interpreter of dreams, I will be helping you through the land, because he helped them with the food. And as a result, all of you, including our parents, will be saved by me and thank me. But maybe that could have been his interpretation. But we don't know that. We only hear what the brothers say.
Right. I want to take that point, Tova, and present how many commentators look at biblical dreams. It relates to what you're saying, and it relates to what Ruby said as well. And that is the following. They see dreams as being prophetic in nature. It's an expression of nevi'ut, of prophecy. And I go so far as to say that it's almost to the point that the dreamer, if understanding the dream, ought to do everything she or he can to see to it that that prophecy be realized. So let me put out there for a moment, let me speak for about 3 minutes now, the Nachmanides approach. It's one of 3 approaches that we want to talk about this morning. And actually, the second approach is really touching upon what you articulated. The first, what Tova was beautifully talking about. Ramban says, let's pick it up in chapter 42, sentence 9. So in chapter 42, sentence 9, there's a famine. Jacob sends his sons, the brothers, to the land because there was a famine. They needed food. And what does the Torah say? The Torah says the following. They appear before Joseph. Vayaker Yosef et Echav, sentence 8. And Joseph, who is dressed as the second to the king, recognizes his brethren, Vehem lo hikiruhu, but they did not realize it. Now, obviously, when they had come to see Joseph, I'm now going back a few sentences before, it says that they came to Egypt. Vayavohu b'nei Yisrael, the sons of Israel, of Jacob, came because of the famine. The Yosef hu hashavit. Yosef was the ruler. He was right at the gates. And the brothers come in and they bow to Joseph. And Yosef sees his brethren and recognizes them, but he doesn't reveal himself to his brothers, and he speaks in strong terms to Yosef. And the Bible surmises, puts it in a summary. Yosef recognizes them. They did not recognize Yosef. Then the sentence says, Vayiskor Yosef et hachalomot. And Joseph remembered his dreams. Asher cholam lohem. Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them. Now, Vayiskor Yosef et hachalomot asher cholam lohem. So the great Rashi actually says that he remembered the dream, v'yada shenitkaimu, shaharei hishtachavu lo, and he knew that they were fulfilled because they bowed to him. The sheaves were bowing to his sheaf, the sun and the moon and the stars were bowing to his sheaf. Now Rashi is the 11th century. Listen to what Nachmanides, who's born almost 100 years after Rashi dies, he quotes Rashi, but he disagrees with Rashi. He says the following. Now, I'm kind of altering Ramban a little bit, cutting through some of the red tape, but this is basically it. He says that Joseph saw them bowing to him, and he recognized that his first dream was fulfilled, but his second dream had not yet been fulfilled. I want to repeat that. What did he know? He knew that the first dream was fulfilled, but the second wasn't. Now I want to say something tangential. Another difference in the dreams is that only the second dream included a number. In the first dream, he says, behold, we are all binding our sheaves. Who's the we? Now, one has to remember that Benjamin was a Yeled Shashuim. He was really the youngest, and he was much younger than Joseph. Much younger than Joseph. Sort of all the other brothers, all of the 10, because there's Benjamin and Joseph born from Rachel. They were the last two to be born, but Joseph was born appreciably before Benjamin. And in the second dream, it doesn't say we were, but it says, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bow down to me. So follow me for a moment. This is Nachmanides. Says Nachmanides, he saw the prophetic realization of the first dream. Because in the first dream, he dreamt that we were binding sheaves. Now, Nachmanides assumes that he was speaking to his he was speaking to his 10 older brothers. He was not speaking to Benjamin. Benjamin was not part of that group. He was too young. He was speaking to his 10 older brothers with whom he had real problems. He had no problems with Benjamin. And he remembers in the dream that the 10 brothers bowed not to him, but to his sheaf, to his sheaf. What's the singular? Whatever the singular is, I think it's sheaf. And at that point, while Joseph recognized them, they didn't know they were bowing to Joseph. It's an ingenious concept. They bowed, basically, and this a bit touches on what Ruby was saying, what Tova was saying. It's a dream of sheaves. They needed food, but they weren't bowing to Joseph per se. They didn't know it was Joseph. They were bowing to the symbol of Joseph, not knowing it was Joseph, to the sheaf, because Joseph was divvying out food. So Joseph realizes, wait a minute. He viewed the dream as prophetic, and he saw the first dream as being fulfilled. And he says, wait a minute, I have to maneuver to see to it that the second dream is fulfilled. And Nachmanides argues that that's why he maneuvers that they go back and they bring Benjamin. And not only that they bring Benjamin, but ultimately, not only Benjamin comes, but who else comes? Jacob is going to come, and Jacob's wives are going to come. And that's the realization of the second dream. The second dream is that the sun is the symbol of Jacob, it's patriarchal. The moon is the symbol not of Rachel. Rachel, unfortunately, has already died. It's the symbol of Jacob's wives, maybe of Bilhah, who was second to Rachel. She was her handmaid, but according to Nachmanides, actually treated not as a handmaid, God forbid, but as an equal wife. And so they came, and the 11 brothers came too. Benjamin was there and bowed to him. And then he says something unbelievable. He says, and I'm quoting from Nachmanides, with this, first of all, let me summarize again. He sees them coming down, bowing to him, not recognizing who he is. The first dream was fulfilled. He therefore then maneuvers, because he feels the responsibility to help the second dream come true. So he maneuvers it so that ultimately Benjamin with the brothers bow to him, with Jacob and his wives, the sun and the moon and the number 11. The 11 bow down, not to a symbol of Joseph, but to Joseph, bowing in the sense of recognizing that he was second to the king in Egypt. Then Nachmanides says, with this understanding, in other words, that namely that Joseph felt compelled to have his dreams fulfilled exactly and in sequence, Ramban resolves another difficulty with our narrative. He writes, were it not with this insight, Joseph would have committed a great sin in causing grief to his father. Keeping him in bereavement and mourning over Simeon and over himself. In other words, Nachmanides is dealing with the question, if Joseph becomes second to the king, wait a minute. Why doesn't he send a communication to his father? How far is Egypt? We know where Egypt is. It's where present Egypt is, from Beersheba, or wherever he was, from Hebron. It's okay, it'll take a couple of days, but Yosef had under his control so many legions who could have gone out very simply. And he doesn't connect with them he doesn't connect with his father to let his father know he was alive. And then he continues. And even if you would say that his desire was to pain his brothers a little for what they had done to him, how could he not have pity on his father suffering in older and older age? Okay, so maybe he wanted to cause his brothers mental anguish. But Nachmanides says, okay, but what about his father who is causing so much mental anguish to his father? Listen to this line. Rather, he did everything well in its proper time in order to fulfill the dreams, for he knew that they would surely be fulfilled. This is, one could look at this as being too fundamentalist, and I debated whether to present it, but I think it's important because it's said by Nachmanides, and there are such presentations, and there certainly is a larger look at dreams as being a nevuah, like the butler and the baker's dreams, once that they were interpreted. They're prophetic dreams that in the end the baker would die. I'm talking about the dreams in prison that Joseph interpreted, and the butler would be returned to his post. I want to stop here before I enter into a second observation and take it from a very, very more different perspective in terms of what dreams are. Anyone just on this? Any thoughts? Julie, if you can recognize.
Looks like Ellen. I'm gonna unmute her. Oh, she.
Okay, I did.
Thank you, Ellen.
I just question the concept of prophetic dreams. If something is prophetic, then how can you maneuver to make it happen? You know, then it's not prophetic anymore. Then it's okay. This is what I wanted to have happen, and so I did it.
Right. There are commentaries on Nachmanides who say something like, in the Bible, again, let's try, Ellen, to go into the thinking of these thinkers going all the way back. There is an idea that no human effort could thwart a divine decree. Now, one could say a lot about this because there are a lot of different approaches that human effort can even thwart a divine decree. But looking at it in this fundamental way, given that no human effort could thwart a divine decree, well, what Joseph may have felt is that, on the contrary, he should do everything possible to hasten its fulfillment. So says the Zichron Yitzchak. It's quoted here in the Art Scroll. Now, given that's a very fundamentalist approach, but Joseph, he had this dream. He felt no matter what he does, it's going to happen. So let me make it happen, and let me make it happen quickly. Once he sees the opening, so he steps into that opening and he tries to maneuver it in such a way that that second dream will be fulfilled as well. I don't want to confuse you, but there are even those, and this could be Ramban, who says that when they first bowed to him, he even felt that his first dream wasn't fulfilled. So he set out to make sure that both dreams would be fulfilled. And if you remember the narrative, I don't want to get too confusing, he maneuvers it first that all of them, now according to Nachmanides, the all of them is all 11, the sheaves. With Benjamin, they come back and they all bow to Joseph, to his sheaf. They still don't recognize him. And it's only afterwards that the second dream is fulfilled, when Jacob and his wives come down, and with the brothers, they acknowledge who Joseph is. But I wanted to say that more simply. That's why I elaborated upon it as I did originally. But I'll take one more comment, and then I want to jump into just a whole second approach so that we move away from this observation, although it's good. But Estelle, I see, is Estelle's hand up? I can't.
Yeah, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
The only way we know of these dreams is what Joseph says, right? I mean, otherwise, how would they know it's a dream? I mean, nobody else had read. Well, is it possible that Joseph may have elaborated and you know, we're assuming that all of this happened because they believed Joseph's dream. He could have been elaborating. Maybe he was sort of making it up. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's Tova touched on that. Again, I know I'm mentioning Tova's name a lot, which I don't mind at all. But let me mention just a second approach, and there's even a third approach. The second approach is that when we dream, our defenses are down. We're not fully in control. The rabbis say you can really tell a person when a person drinks. When you drink, the masks are off, the screens are off. So when we dream, our defenses are down, and at times we reveal more of ourselves. From this particular approach, dreams can reveal what what we're really about, what our aspirations are, what our mission in life is all about, what our dreams are all about. So let me step back for a moment. You've often heard me say ad nauseum we often speak of the word covenant. Covenant is a contract. It's a contract between the human being and God. Sometimes the covenant is universal. The covenant of the rainbow after the flood, which was given to all of humankind. And then there's a covenant particularistically given to the Jewish people. Now, whenever there is covenant in the book of Genesis, speaking to the Jewish people, covenantal agreements must include land and children. It always includes land, the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, and children. Why is that so? And we've often framed it this way. Let's think about America. What is America all about? Well, America is about, it's a dream. You know, I have we just had it in the Daf Yomi about words, about English words and English names. The way the Daf Yomi presents it in a very narrow way, they say every language has fragments of Hebrew. It's unbelievable, but that's what they say. And certainly the Talmud in Megillah, which is the next tractate to be studied in the Daf Yomi, they write out all the Persian names in the Esther story, the Purim story. They write it out in Hebrew, and looking at it in Hebrew, they try to break it down. So when one looks at the word America, I think the word is a Native American word, I think. But when I write it out, America, it's Aleph, Mem, Resh, Kuf, Hey, Omar, Ka. The Lord said. It's like, I know there's a separation of church and state, but the Lord is America, Omar Ka. It's a mission. And of course, we all know that the Constitution and so much of the founding fathers, I wish they were mothers as well, so much of the dream of America, it gleaned from Jewish sources. There's a mission of America. My teacher at New York University, when I was studying for religion, I was studying for a doctorate. I'm actually ABD, which means all but the doctorate, all but writing. Maybe it's called ABW, all but dissertation. That's the ABD. My father said, come on, you should have taken your first book, Women at Prayer. That could have been your dissertation. All right, that's going to have to be in another world. I'm not going to get the doctorate. But he always used to say, Dr. Moran, who was a linguist, he always used to say, just remember there's a difference between the United States and America. The United States is a country with all its attendant problems, with racism and sexism and violence and racial conflict. America, that's the dream. That's the dream. And I remember calling him after 9/11 and I said, Gabe, I've got proof you're right. All of the patriotic songs, they don't have United States in the song. It's always America, America, God bless America. America's the dream, Omaka. So there's a mission. But as we all know, with the mission comes manifest destiny. You need a land. From where will the mission be expounded? From where will it come? And of course, we're all aware of what's going on the southern border, whatever one's politics, whatever one feels. There's a lot of discussion of people, of children, the dreamers, who is considered in America, who has residency, who has a green card, who has citizenship. And I think America got it from the covenantal idea in the Torah. In the Torah, covenant is always associated with land and children. Another way of saying children is people. No matter how old we are, we're children. When I turned 70 and my father was still alive, And he used to give me a blessing. He used to look into my eyes and say, how is my little boy doing? We're all children in the end. And so Joseph has a dream. And I first heard this from the great Rabbi Menachem Leibtak, who has been teaching Tanakh forever. He lives and teaches in Yeshivat Har Etzion. He says, if we listen closely to Joseph's dreams, the way he presented it, the brothers had a lot to be concerned about. Because what does he dream about? His first dream is about land. And when the brothers hear this, they get a little concerned. Wait a minute. Land is a piece of the covenant. What is he saying? Is he saying that the covenant is his? We're going to bow to his land, to his sheaf? We're not part of the covenant? Goodness, is he saying that we're going to be like Ishmael of old, who didn't make it into the covenantal continuity? It was Yitzchak or Esau. He didn't make it in. Jacob made it. They're concerned. They're very concerned. And then he has a second dream. And what is the second dream about? He's dreaming of stars. And in the book of Genesis, what are the stars metaphors of? When Abraham enters into the Brit Ben Abtarim, the covenant of the pieces, God says to Abraham, Habita na hashamayma, look to the heavens, uspor hakochavim, count the stars, into chalis porotam. I don't think he meant it quantitatively, but qualitatively. Can you count them? Each is so beautiful and important. So the stars in Genesis, and this is not a push, is representative of children. So what is Joseph dreaming of? He's dreaming of land and children. And then the Torah says, it's not just that they were jealous of Joseph. Let's take a look at this. I'm going back to chapter 37. Look at the emotional reaction of the brothers. After his first dreams, it says that they hated him. Okay. After the second dream, then it says they were jealous of him. Very different. Because by the second dream, it was not just a hatred. The jealousy was, oh my God, he's saying he is going to be the fourth patriarch. And we will not be part of the patriarchal continuity. They didn't know, by the way, that with the birth of children to Jacob, it would no longer be that one is in and the other is out, because in the end, all of the children of Jacob were part of the continuity. There are only 3 patriarchs. And so this dream revealed what was happening in Joseph's deepest heart and soul. It revealed that he wanted to be the ruler. And that's where the brothers took exception. They take exception, and according to the Seferno, who was a 15th, he is born in 1475, died in 1550, from Italy. He was a universalist. According to the Seferno, the brothers, this is dangerous stuff to say in contemporary times, with the assassination of the Prime Minister of Israel and the greatest act of Chilul Hashem, the brothers saw Joseph as a kind of rodef, as a pursuer. If A is pursuing B to do B harm, B can stop A. They saw Joseph as a pursuer, taking away their covenantal rights. And therefore, he says, well, what they did is not justifiable. It gives you an understanding of what's happening. But for us, our second approach to dreams is not that dreams are, in a fundamentalist way, prophetic in nature, but the dream expresses what's in our inner souls, our inner hearts. I want to stop here, and Julie sent me a message that who's?
Bert wants to say something, and so does Tova. So
Okay.
I guess Bert,
Please.
Bert's hand was up first.
I'm taking notes. We're going to hear. And then I have one more approach of Rabbi Soloveitchik, which is absolutely gorgeous. Please,
This
Bert.
is not quite on your point, but it's sort of the reverse of something you were saying. One of the reasons that Yosef didn't make contact with his father and other people is because he assumed that he was not part of the covenant and he was not the one that was chosen. This is not my thought. I got this from Shmuel Golden, who probably got it from someone else. So that's why he said, listen, there's one person who's chosen in every generation. Here I'm in Egypt. I'm not the chosen one.
Right. So what, he felt rejected, Bert?
But yeah, he felt rejected. Nobody came to find him. Nobody. And stuff like that. And so he felt as though that he was not part of the. He was not part of the covenant.
There's a lot of history to that, Bert. When you think about it, Cain does wrong. Cain is rejected. Ishmael is perceived as doing wrong. He's expelled. Esau also. By the way, maybe that's what Isaac felt when he was sent to Moriah. Maybe he also felt on some level expelled. And maybe that's a very, very good point that you're making.
But you should just know this one quick thing is that
Yes.
Shmuel Golden says, the title of his thing is clever. Why didn't Yosef write home? And
I'm sorry,
so,
Bert.
he says, why didn't Yosef write home?
Bert, you're fading in and fading out.
Well, Shmuel Golden calls this particular thing. Why didn't he write home? He was, a king, could have sent the message. And he said, the answer is because he felt he was not the covenantal choice.
Right. I can't help myself back, just anecdotally, tangentially. My father used to say that life is like, do you remember the old postcards? As my father got older, he used to say, life is like a postcard. Do you remember the postcards? They had a picture on one side, and on the other side, half of the card was where you wrote the address, and the other half is where you wrote down. So my father used to say, did you ever see the way someone writes on a postcard? When they write on a postcard at the beginning, dear son, dear daughter, dear Abba, dear Ima. And at first, the letters are legible. Then as you're getting down to the bottom, suddenly the letters are getting smaller and smaller and tinier because you want to get it all in. And then you're moving the letters and they're kind of moving it to the side and they appear going vertically instead of horizontally. He used to say that's what life is. As you get older and recognize no one's going to live forever, you keep trying to squeeze it in. You keep trying to. Just thought I would mention that. But Joseph, all he had to do was say, Dad, I'm alive. I'm in Egypt. Come down. And he did it. Tova, yes. Yes, Tova, you have to unmute.
Yeah.
As usual, after hearing you, I see this whole thing completely differently. When
I love that. I love it, Tova.
when Joseph had those first dreams, at that time, he was just an arrogant teenager, the favorite of his father, hated by the brothers. He was not an interpreter of dreams. And he had these dreams. The brothers hated him anyway. That's definitely the way they would look at those dreams. It just added fuel to the rage. Then, when in Egypt, he became an interpreter of dreams. And when the brothers came in and bowed down to him at the gates, not recognizing him, then he thought back on that dream. And he said, maybe this is an interpretation. This is a fulfillment of that first dream. And there was also the second dream. And
Yeah.
then, but when he thinks about the second dream and the sun and the moon are coming with the others, he says, I didn't contact my father because he was the one who sent me out in danger to my brothers. And I made a place for myself
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have anything to do with those brothers or my father. And now he said, hey, maybe that second dream was that I have to contact the father and the brothers and help them. The second dream could not absolutely come true because his mother, the moon, was not there anymore.
Right.
But maybe he gave thought to it.
Right.
Because otherwise, why not contact his father? He was
Right.
angry with his father and very angry with the brothers. And they say there is one Mefarech that says, but Yitzchak knew that he was alive.
Right. Just jotting down. Yeah. Look, this
Rabbi,
is
nevertheless, the first thing he asked them was, is his father well? Is his father all right? That's the first question he asked the brothers.
right.
Because
Right.
he realizes that the dream is there, that he
Right.
has to do something for them. Now he's
Let me
an
just-
interpreter
thank you.
of things.
Let me just end by sharing with you. Thank you. Thank you all. Let me just a third approach. And the third approach, the second approach is that dreams reveal much about ourselves. It reveals what's in our deepest parts. So we have a prophetic approach, we have a revelatory approach. The third approach that Rabbi Soloveitchik takes is a psychological approach. That often dreams could represent, on its two extremes, two different types of people. There is one person who dreams about the world as it could be, dreams about new horizons, that there's going to be a newness to the world that we should prepare for, always looking into the future. And the other is those who psychologically dream out of concern that what they have, they will lose. So listen to what he says. This is what he says. What, in truth, had disturbed Joseph's peace of mind? In regard to such matters, our sages have said, a person's dreams bespeak his innermost thoughts and feelings. Now he's going to present Joseph and contrast it to his brothers. Joseph saw himself and his brothers in an alien environment, far from the land of Israel of Canaan, in new circumstances and under new conditions of life. In his dream, he saw, behold, we are binding sheaves. We are no longer in Canaan. We are in the land of Egypt and can no longer be shepherds. Perhaps one can add, maybe he even saw himself in the land of Israel. We're no longer able to only be shepherds, we'll be farmers. We are integrated into a new economy with new styles of living, characteristics, and laws. We can no longer support ourselves by pasturing sheep. The sons of Jacob have to learn new occupations such as farming. I mean, farming was pretty much alien in the book of Genesis. It's mentioned in passing with Isaac and so on, maybe Cain and Abel, but it's in passing. Basically, Genesis, the occupation was shepherds. So Joseph dreamt of a new day. He dreamt of the time when it's a shir chadash, a new song. It'll be a new world. It's going to be the world when we're binding sheaves. Basically, he dreamt, I'm reading now, of a new framework within which the unity of the family could be preserved, even in the far places where the creator of the universe would scatter them. His constant preoccupation was the continuation of Abraham's tradition amidst a new economic structure and civilization. And the second dream, he dreams, we're not only going to be dreaming about the earth, we're going to be dreaming about the heavens. It'll be, as my parents would say, a neue Welt. It's going to be a new world, the Americas, the neue Welt. That's what they used to say in Europe, where rabbis said, don't go to America, you'll assimilate. And others would say, no, that's the golden Medina, that's the neue Welt. And the Zionists were saying, Israel, that's going to be the neue Welt. That will be the place where we can be sovereign. The brothers, remember, Rabbi Soloveitchik, the genius that he is, he was a genius in understanding the human condition. Most contemporary philosophers talk about God. Now, Soloveitchik, Rabbi Soloveitchik, believed in God deeply. He didn't talk about that. He wrote halachic man in the generic sense. He wrote halachic mind. He wrote the lonely man of faith. His writings, Lonely Man of Faith, are studied in the most advanced doctorate programs of psychology. In the most advanced programs, not only in divinity schools, in Notre Dame and elsewhere, but he studied as almost as a psychological text. And he says that from a psychological perspective, Joseph dreamt of this new world, but the brothers did not understand it. For they looked upon the future as a continuation of the present. They perceived all problems from within the framework of their life in Canaan, the land of their fathers' wanderings, in the traditional surroundings, in the thoroughly familiar habitat of the patriarchs. They did not need new frameworks or novel economic methods. But Joseph was different. Joseph was dreaming of a new day, and therefore he said, we have to prepare for that new day. While the brothers said, be careful. If that's what you're going to be focusing on, even what we have, we will quite possibly lose. We live our lives. We're already living in holiness. We're supporting ourselves by pasturing sheep. We don't have to worry about the future. We'll get by without sheaves, without the sun, without the moon, without the 11 stars. He was a master in homiletics. And he writes, I'll just read to you what he writes. Not all of it came true. He writes, the Joseph of 5,662, and that's the equivalent of 1900. He's writing in the 1960s, instinctively sensed that the relative tranquility, peace, quiet, security in which his brethren lived, he was living in 1900 in Europe, it was relatively quiet, was only an illusion. The Joseph of 1900 saw in his dream, and behold, we were binding sheaves, that we would be enveloped by a new economic order. The lion's share of Jewry would be centered in the Western world, not in Eastern Europe. And society would be based on science, where the sun and the moon and the 11 stars will radiate scientific learning and technology, where every scientific discovery will be publicized in the newspapers as the greatest sensation, where all professions will be linked to higher education. The Joseph of 1900 unconsciously sensed that it was forbidden to rely on a continuation of the status quo, that great changes were about to occur in Jewish life, for which we would have to be prepared. He sensed the advent of an era where there would be no yeshivot in Eastern Europe and in Russia, in Brisk, in Vilna, in Minsk, when America would be turned into a place of Torah, and when Israel, the state of Israel, would become the core center of Torah. And then just a final piece of reading. Let us dispel an illusion, the Joseph Dreamer is saying. We cannot pin much hope on the diaspora. Assimilation grows daily. I would say too, anti-Semitism is growing daily. Even in those circles which logically should be immune, like a fortress wall standing fast to make sure that the Jewish people are secure, that too one day will be lost. True, there is a bit of Torah in the diaspora. However, the number of Torah students, even in America, is proportionally very low, and it's impossible to forecast what will happen to succeeding generation. Though actually there's a very strong number of yeshiva students in America, but it doesn't come close to what's in America. We are in a small ship that maneuvers slowly, he writes, and clumsily in a stormy sea. Whereas in that very non-observant Israel, the future of Torah and traditional Judaism is far more secure. What he was saying is that he was speaking to the right-wing rabbis who were very anti-Zionist. They were anti-America. Stay where you are, because if you're going to push, we're going to even lose what we have. And Joseph said, we better prepare for a new day, a day in the West in America, and a day of Zionism. That is what Rabbi Soloveitchik contrasts Joseph and his brethren. Joseph was the one who dreams of a new world. We're not shepherds. It was like he was inventing the wheel. We are binding sheets. He didn't just dream of terrestrial images of the earth. He was dreaming celestially. He was dreaming of heavenly reaches. Where the one agrees with the Rav, his writing is eloquent. Not that all that he forecasted came true. A lot of what he forecasted didn't come true, but he's right. And I dare say that I think in America these days, I'll say it straight, with all that's unfolding in America, I don't know what the future will bring 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Who knows whether the dream of the American democracy, the jury is out as to what will be. And I would argue the jury is out in terms of the future of Judaism in America on all levels, as anti-Semitism is spiraling and it almost has become the norm. And even as outside of the Orthodox community, we're reading every day about the struggles in a community that I bless they should succeed in turning it around. The hetero, the conservative, and our sisters and brothers in those communities. So the Joseph was saying, prepare for the new day. So let me hear what you think, what your feelings are about this. Any thoughts? We have like just 3 or 4 minutes. So just to summarize, we looked at dreams as being prophetic. We looked at dreams as being revelatory in the sense that it reveals our inner self. And then we view dreams as being psychological. There's a dreamer who dreams of the new day, and there's a dreamer who's always worried, Gewalt, am I going to be able to hold on to what I have? And I think part of living is, if I'm only remembering the past is very important, but it's also important to remember the future. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, how do you remember the future? But in the prayer we say, on Rosh Chodesh, Yalev V'Yavo, we say, Yalev V'Yavo V'Yagia V'Yero'eh Zichronenu V'Fikdonenu V'Zichron Avotenu. May we have memories of Zichron Moshiach ben David Abdecha. May we remember the Messiah. Really, the Messiah is not yet come. There's such a thing as memory of the future, dreaming of the future. Yes, Natalie.
We have lifted the symbolism of the dream to a very high level. But I think Torah shows him as a youngster who's been bullied and who's been made fun of, and he's in his dream, he's getting back at them.
Yes. Natalie, there's no way to look, one way to look at this. And I would argue, Natalie, that you are absolutely correct. And they say, Ein mikra yotzei midei pshuto. You got to look at the literal meaning, and absolutely. But beautiful texts are a text that can be interpreted.
Yes,
different ways.
I agree.
And that's what he's doing.
Yes,
He's trying to interpret it in a flowery way
yes,
as only he could interpret it. But I think it's a message to us that Joseph Dream resonates, that if all my life is, I'm worried today about holding on to what I have, and I'm not looking forward to the future, something is remiss.
all well and good, Rabbi. All well and good.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, you are the symbol. You are the person who, thank God, God has given you years and many, many more years to come. I shared with you the other day, Natalie, that there was a woman, 105 years old, who ran the 100-meter dash. And you told me you actually saw that on TV.
Yes, I did. Yes. Not for me, Rabbi.
Right. Well, you run the 100-meter dash in many different ways, Natalie. That is for sure. Anybody? This is really, I must say,
Bev's
none
hand
of
is up, Rabbi.
none of this is mine, so I can say this is beautiful stuff. It really-
Rabbi, I think Bev's hand is up.
Yes, Bev. Bev,
She's trying to unmute.
okay, and I know Ezra's getting on, so Bev, you have the last word.
I just like to say that in our time, and there are visionaries, we don't call them prophets, but they see the future in many different ways, evaluating the situation as it is now. Of course, to see that Joseph will see people farming, agriculture, being stable to the ground, not wanderers with sheep, but able to hold a territory, that was visionary for him.
Yes, it was.
And for us, we have to include climate change, what we're doing to the world, to see what the vision will be. Overpopulation, despoilization of. We have to see the visionaries of today have a different look, a different thing to look forward to. And so we need to recognize those people who are looking towards the future, and the problems are global. They're not like Joseph's problems, which were tribal, but global. And that's a much better, bigger challenge.
Yes, I appreciate it. And you know, I want to work on a piece, Julie, and the piece is going to be, I love Israel, not despite the fact that I'm a progressive. I love Israel because I'm a progressive. And that touches a little bit on what you're saying, because Israel has really been out there. And I just want to conclude with a little nigun in memory of Eliyahu David K. This is a new guitar that my dear friend Shimmy bought for me. It's too much. It's a very expensive guitar. So I said, Shimi, this is going to cost me because with this guitar, I have to finally take guitar lessons. But this is a prayer in his memory. He loved Israel. He was in Samkhan. But he had a universal quest for peace and justice. So this is a little nigun I wrote. Higi lecha Adam ma tov u'ma Hashem doresh mimcham da di da dam da di da dam da di da dam da 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 dum. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with the Lord. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with the Lord. Die, 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 die. Go in peace, dear Elia. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And Ezra is going to give the second shiur. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Oh, my love, everyone. A wonderful
Shalom.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Invest and appreciate
Thank
all
you,
we have.
Rabbi.
God bless you, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We'll give everyone a few minutes to stretch, grab a drink, take care of any needs. We'll start at 11:28. And thanks for those who are staying from the class or those who just came on. I'm looking forward to learning together.
Ezra, my kids are still here and you've got to catch me up when I see you next week, okay?
Sounds good. Sounds good, Estelle.
On the things that I'm missing.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, bye,
Bye. We'll miss you. Have fun.
thanks. I don't know, I never seem to be hungry in the morning.
Mother, you want what?
I never seem to be hungry in the morning.
Oh, you don't have to eat. It's not morning, it's noon already. So
Yes, dear. Yes, dear.
Okay. Looks like folks are mostly back. It's good to be here today. We're going to finish the 6th chapter of Daniel. I think I've said this for the last 6 weeks that we're going to finish the 6th chapter each week. But then everyone surprises, well, not really surprises me, but everybody, brings out all these amazing ideas and questions that launch us into conversation. And we only read a pasuk, which is pretty much our minhag. So that's our goal is to read the last few psukim of chapter 6. Discuss them, and then starting next week we'll begin chapter 7. And if next week we have to finish chapter 6 again, we'll do that again next week. That's okay too. I think that it's a mutual feeling to say that it's just so wonderful to learn together, and I don't care when or how we finish. I don't know what finishing even means. We'll just find another book to sit in and get mired in and find ourselves invested in. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Okay. So last class we talked about how we really looked not just at Daniel being saved in this moment, but also its parallels to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the earlier chapter, looking at the way people are saved and what kind of intentionality appears to be required in order to be saved. We discussed sort of who is praying. Is it Daniel praying, or is it the king praying? And we also talked about the malach, and what is a malach? What is a messenger or an angel? Is that a real person who's embodying a role, a divine role in some way? Or is it really some kind of ethereal, otherworldly figure that shows up in the right moment to save the day? In the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah chapter, we saw that the king described seeing a fourth figure in the fire with them. Here in our chapter, we see Daniel describe that an angel muzzled, or an angel shut the mouth of the lion. Is that a real angel? Is that some kind of metaphor for a person who did something to set up the situation in a way that would be effective for him? And our conversation also turned in this conversation about whether angels are real or sent, or somebody chooses to take on an angelic role. Also, this conversation about which we've been skirting around throughout the entirety of the Sefer Daniel, and I guess pretty much every class since I started teaching at the Bayit, is the question of divine intervention. Do we see divine intervention in our lives? Are we selectively seeing about that? When good things happen, we say, God has swooped in and given me the parking spot right in front of the Met. Amazing. Or do we say, right? And then do we use that exclusively for good things, right? We don't say, God has swooped in and given my parent cancer, right? Like, God forbid. Or some people do, right? So these kinds of questions are brought up here as we learn these texts, because these texts takes place in the diaspora. It's this narrative about people with God's involvement. And when God is involved, we ask, is that a matter of perception? Is that a fact of reality? Does it look like a God or an angelic angel, or does it all just feel human the same way our lives feel today? And so these questions really do show up in a very powerful and important way here in our text. And Lance, I see your hand, 1 second. I think I forget who it was last week who said, I'm sorry, for not remembering who. But someone's describing, right? Oh, an angel saved me. I was driving down. I was driving really fast, and then this person flagged me down, and they needed directions, and I did it. And then I pulled up to the I pulled up to the traffic light. There had been a huge accident 30 seconds before, and I would have been in that accident had I not stopped to give. Then this angel saved me. Is that an angel? Right? Do we believe? How do we conceive of that or talk about that? And so those, to me, that kind of question is being raised here in Sefer Daniel. And I think that's a question that gets raised in this week's Parsha. When Yosef goes to check on his brothers on his way, right? He's not really sure where they are. On his way, it says that he meets a person. And he says, "Oh, have you seen my brothers?" And the guy says, "Yeah, they're that way. Go down over there." Here, we can pull it up just so everyone can see. Okay. So Yaakov sends him out to go find his brothers. Vayim sa'eu ish. And he sees a person wandering in the field, and he asks the person, "Vayishaleo ish lemor, ma tivakesh." So the person asks him rather, "What do you need?" And he says, "Oh, I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, do you know where they're shepherding? You know where they're tending to their flocks?" And so the man said, "They travel here or there," right? And on the one hand, this is just could be a story, a regular story. He bumps into someone on the street and says, "Hey, have you seen a bunch of people who look like me, all tending sheep, speaking the language of Haran?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I know those guys." Or is there something, is this person sent here? Is this person embodying some kind of divine role? We have to I don't have a clear answer for these questions. I think you can kind of go different ways, and I think even in the course of a person's life or a day or in a particular event, you might feel or choose to create narrative about how to describe or explain these types of phenomena. But what I think that our Parsha or the book of Daniel does is at least raises these questions about how do we choose to interpret the coincidences or the moments or the strangers in our lives, or the salvations. Do we see God as being part of those or not? And I think that's a very powerful and important question that we ask ourselves as religious, however you define religious, as people engaged in a religious or traditional Jewish community. I don't think any of us can absolve ourselves from those questions. Lance.
Okay. Miriam wrote, "Am I the only one to see the resemblance in this Zoom screen between Ted and Rabbi Lord Sachs, late Rabbi Lord Sachs?" And I think this is an excellent example of what you're talking about. As a retired professor of literature, I am talking about allegory. And in allegory, you have levels of meaning. They are all simultaneously valid. And I think it's also, there's a way of looking at the Torah with this 4 levels. Am I correct? Pardes is one, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
You sound like you have a cold.
I don't have a cold. I just choked on my coffee.
Okay. But anyway, I'd like to make a comment here. The comment here is that Miriam is looking at this picture and she is reminded of Rabbi Lord Sachs. Is that a coincidence, an accident, or is there something more going on here? For example, I would suggest that Miriam has seen the ghost of Rabbi Sachs in this picture. And just as I would suggest that the Ish in the story of Joseph is an angel of God, because God is manipulating this narrative, at least for me. And if you don't have the interaction, Joseph might have gone on somewhere else, and all of Jewish history, all of world history perhaps, would be changed. And Genesis, it seems to me, is an excellent example of how God's in the world. Now, most people today, including my son, do not see God's hand anywhere. Some people see God's hand in certain things, like if you're driving along and you say, an angel saved me from crashing into a car, something like that. But my suggestion would be that God, again, going back to my concept of Elohim, God has multiple avatars. And you see all these avatars here. In other words, Lord Sachs is really an avatar for God, or not, depending on how you look at it. And we have perceptions, and our perceptions give us these levels of meaning, but different people see different levels. And very few people, I hope, or I guess not, I guess, see all of these levels. And that's what I'm trying to suggest, that they're all here simultaneously. And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Lance. I that resonates deeply, that sort of the world is operating in different layers at all times. There was this, just relating, there was once, people know what Facebook is, right? So I'm in this like a parent, there's like a parent Facebook group. And so a parent said, my 7-year-old, they recently got scared of going upstairs by themselves to their room at night. They used to be fine, and now they're scared. They say there's ghosts up there. And so most of the responses, you have the whole range. You have people saying, they got to suck it up. Every kid gets scared of the dark. You just send them up. They'll eventually be okay. To the parents who say, give them a flashlight. Tell them that it's a magic wand that banishes the ghost. Or, make sure do they have a stuffed animal? And, all the kind of sort of like typical parenting tricks, right? And then you have the very like attachment parents who are like, make sure you hold their hand, cuddle with them for 10 minutes, and then leave, then come back and cuddle for 5 minutes or whatever, like, all the things to make sure they feel safe and secure, etc. And then there was like a few posts. This one woman was just like, well, maybe there's a ghost up there. Like you got to get rid of the ghost. Like if they're scared of the ghost, get rid of the ghost and then they'll be fine. And, when I first saw that, I was like, this person must be joking, right? And then it's like, I don't know. Meaning like I don't believe in ghosts. Like if we sit here and say, Ezra, make a list of supernatural things that you believe in, ghost wouldn't be one of them. Right? And yet like the simplicity and the like, hey, what if the explanation for this strange event that this kid is irrationally scared of a figure in their room is that there's actually a ghost up there, to whatever that means, and that we have to address it on that level, on that layer. I think was, to me, I found that as like a very powerful and a humbling thing to entertain, even as I also found it humorous and ridiculous. I also was thinking like, well, I don't know, in the realm of possible things about how the universe could work, I guess there could be a ghost that's scaring this person's child. And maybe if that's addressed on some way, treating that as a real thing, that not just as giving your kid a trick to override this irrational feeling, but rather saying like, how do you get rid of ghosts? And like, as I say it, I feel silly, but I think there's some like value to seeing the way that the world can operate on those various different layers. And I think I'm getting at what Lance is getting at as well. Is that true?
I don't think you should feel these things are silly. And there's a real question that we have, everyone on the planet has, and that is, what happens after we die? Do we just go into the ground? Like an atheist would say, okay, your body ends, it's all terminal, and it's as if you never lived. But someone who is perhaps religious would say that no, there's an afterlife. It could be an orchard. It could be in the television series Uploaded could be some kind of virtual place where your brain has been kept, and just like Zoom. I mean, Zoom could be a kind of purgatory or death room, whatever you want to call it, where we can actually talk to people who are dead. And the thing that fascinates me more than anything else is that I frequently have thoughts that come into my head. I mean, you can say I'm schizophrenic, and that's in itself a problem. But where do those thoughts come from? In other words, I get a thought, I solve a problem. How do I solve that problem? I get a thought in my head. And where does that thought come from? I don't have the experience. I don't have the training. And yet a thought comes into my head and I solve a problem. And maybe someone who's a professional is looking at this problem, trying to solve it. And wait a minute, Lance Cohen solved the problem. How could Lance Cohen possibly do that? And if you make the assumption that there are more things in heaven and earth than dreamt of in our philosophies, then it is possible to think about higher powers that help us or hurt us. I think it's Elon Musk who came up with the idea that we're part of a giant computer, maybe 1 billion years advanced. And these are all thoughts and perceptions, really, perceptions. And I wouldn't label them silly, anything, what thought comes into your head, I wouldn't label that silly, Rav Ezra. Yeah.
Thanks, Lance. All right, so I think it's good. It's a good place, good moment to jump in to our text. So let's jump in back in verse 22. So then Dan said unto the king, O king, live forever, and here he makes his declaration, may God has sent his angel and has shut the lion's mouth, and they have not hurt me, for as much as before his innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. And so there was some beautiful conversation last week, not only about sort of Daniel's perception, but also this question of what makes one deserving of salvation. Is it innocence, right? Daniel attributes it to his own merit or innocence that God has graced him with. That maybe is different than sort of God's mercy for somebody undeserved, or for because somebody asked, or because they made some kind of negotiation or deal. So there's this sense that the salvation, and I think this is a thing people feel, I guess, right? That like when you've been saved from a precarious situation, it's like, I guess, and I've heard people describe this experience, I guess there's still more for me to do on this earth, or it wasn't my time, right? And so you sort of capture a little bit of that kind of phenomenon here. Okay, so then let's go to verse 24. Do I have a reader?
You want me to read?
Please.
I can read if you want.
Okay.
Then I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. Then was the king exceeding glad and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought those men that had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And they had not come to the bottom of the den when the lions had mastery over them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote unto all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I made a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and earth. Who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. it seems really reminiscent of Esther
Okay.
and the killing of the killing of all of the people who had plotted against her. Not only Haman and his family, but that the Jews were allowed to kill so many people.
Which
the-
part about that? Like the children and their wives? That
Yeah,
aspect?
that's the part that bothers me.
Okay, good. Right. So Ellen, good. This is Ellen's getting us started. Ellen knows the minhag of the class. What are the things that jump out at you? What are the things that you notice? What are the things that you're reminded of? What associations do you have with this text? And the first thing Ellen's pointing out, like, okay, you know, so they got it wrong with Daniel. He has God on his team. He's saved. And so the reaction is to kill the plotters, to kill these people who are trying to throw Daniel into a lion's den, if you will. And and the way that they exact retribution is by sort of doing the same thing that they tried to do. They tried to do to him. But it's more than that, because whereas Daniel seems to be singularly or individually thrown in, Ellen's noting here it's like not just them, it's also their spouses and their children, like their whole families seem to be, have to suffer as a result of this failed attempt at knocking off their political opponent. What else?
I mean, we
Ellen.
never hear, but Danielle lived there for a very long time. And we don't hear whether he had a wife and children, but they certainly were not cast into the den, or did they suffer any of the other things that he suffered?
Yeah, we don't know anything about Danielle's personal life.
Right.
Right.
But why the excess? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna leave that as a question for now. It's a good question. Anyone else want to jump in response either to Ellen or other things that jumped out at you or you noticed in these final verses of this chapter? We should read it again if we need. Yeah, Elaine?
Yeah, he becomes mythic and unreal, like Ellen said. He doesn't seem like a real person. And then when Cyrus, I think it says Cyrus comes, I don't know if there's any mention that he allowed the Jews to go back. But Daniel continues with his dreams. So I don't know, it becomes unreal to me and not historic.
You're saying in the king's declaration here, like Darius gets elevated to this like legendary.
Oh, no, Daniel becomes mythic.
Even in this last line, you're saying.
Yeah.
Or you're saying it throughout the whole book, this feeling of like, is Daniel, right? He's this like the superhero who always saving the day, always can interpret the dreams. Nothing ever bad happens to him. Like in that sense, Elaine?
Yeah, there are miracles associated with him. Yeah, I don't see him having a wife and kids.
Yeah.
Down to earth,
Yeah, right. We're like, and I think it's interesting, Elaine, right? And maybe this is speaking to Ellen's point, right? That the contrast with this other advisors who are thrown in with their wife and children, right? That contrast is so felt. We're like, oh yeah, wives and children, like home life, all these other things that people have, which this is the first mention of at all in our entire text, right? We've gone 6 chapters now talking about kind of like the political and intrigue and dreams and religion and prophecy of the various kings of Bavel. And it all seems to take place between the king and Daniel and maybe one or two or some other, advisor classes. But we haven't seen a full picture of the other characters. Who's their families? Where are they from? And so that's an interesting thing to note. Maybe Daniel doesn't have a family. Maybe Daniel doesn't have a wife and kids. Maybe he really is fully all in and dedicated to the king's court. But I think your question sort of stands is like, wait, who is Daniel? Does he really have any kind of color or complexity, or he's just kind of like all in and holy, and he can't be harmed, and he solves all the problems, right? That is very mythic and legendary in a way that feels not grounded in reality. Is that getting at what you're? It's like the total opposite of Shimshon, right? Shimshon, we saw Samson, he can't figure out things with his parents, he can't figure out things with the girlfriends, he can't figure out things with the in-laws. Right? He's like, even in his like attempt to be this like Gibor or Shofet in Israel, he's like, his relationships are like a total mess, right? Avraham, he fights with Lot, he has Sarah and Hagar, right? He's like this great figure, and then there's all this family drama. Moshe too, you see this, right? And although less interactions with family once he sort of, or we get less Zipporah or his children interactions, but still is all this very human component. Daniel, it's like, all right, he's the guy in the kingdom. He gets the kosher food. He gives the prophecy. He gets raised up. He's doing well. Someone tries to knock him down a peg. He raises himself back up. He gets saved. He's good. He's good. He's good. Right? Like, it's a little bit flat in its legendariness, as far as a character goes. Maybe if you feel like I'm over characterizing or not giving Daniel the complexity that he's due, please react or respond. But I do think Elaine
No, I
is making
mean,
a really interesting point.
The only good thing that Danielle has done throughout is remain faithful to his God in his belief or practice. That's it. You don't see him really helping other people. You don't see him doing anything except remaining faithful, which is not a small thing. I mean, I'm not making that into a small thing, but that's it. There are no dimensions to what he does.
That's very interesting.
And he doesn't even say, he never says, I want revenge. Or look at what these people have tried to do to me. He has no dimension at all.
By being a role model and being faithful to his faith, that is doing something for other people.
It's interesting.
Don't get
Yeah.
a sense of his awareness of the world around him. I mean, the ones who are being killed, the families who are being killed are not Jews, but they are, people. And he doesn't seem to have any inclination to intervene in any way. And considering how much, capital he has with the king, why doesn't he ask that at least the families, the wives and the children, be saved?
Yeah, these are really questions. I want to address what you're saying in a second, Miriam and Ellen. This is a very rich conversation. I think Bev started to talk, and I just wanted to make sure I got to hear what she had been saying. Bev?
By remaining faithful to his faith, he is doing something for other people. He's a role model.
Uh-huh.
And either people will pick that up and see or not. And that's not nothing.
Okay, it's really interesting, right? So I think we're seeing here then in hearing Ellen and Elaine and Miriam and Bev, sort of this like rich question of how do we, when we look at Daniel and his set of actions, are we seeing what values, forget our evaluation or our judgment, whether that's good or bad, but in describing him, how would we describe Daniel, right? It seems to be we all agree that he's a man of faith, of deep faith and commitment to God. He doesn't seem to be particularly concerned with the welfare of others, right? We haven't seen him sort of advocate on behalf of anybody. He's dutifully done his role as an advisor and as a prophet. And it's kind of, it's kind of like an interesting, and that's sort of who Danielle is. And so what I'm hearing from Miriam and Ellen and Elaine is that there's some judgment there. How come he doesn't speak up, or where is his care for other people? And I'm hearing from Bev sort of like, I don't know, like this is like a really important quality that Danielle is highlighting. Like, what is it to be a person of faith? What is it? How does one hold on to their faith in a context that doesn't necessarily permit it or allow it, or is incredibly dangerous to those types of attitudes or worldviews? And so, yeah, we're not dealing with whether he has a sense of justice or not. That's like a conversation for Esther or for Isaiah. But for Daniel, what we care about is, can you exist in a foreign kingdom, where they're demanding worshiping other gods, where there's not a lot of Jewish infrastructure, and can you maintain your religious commitments? And so, and that's the thrust of the book, not these other values which we see important or see play out in other books or with other characters. If
This
you
is
guys
gonna s-
disagree with the way I've characterized your positions, or you want to weigh in on this framing, I welcome all responses. Yes, Ellen.
This is going to sound really awful, I think, but
Okay.
What
but
an
he
introduction.
reminds me of the idea that a Haredi in Israel should not have to serve in the army because he's studying Torah, and that's all he has to do, and that's it, and that makes him righteous, or that's a contribution to Israel. And it's sort of like letting everybody else do what has to be done to ensure that Israel exists. I'm not making the parallel exactly, I think, but that's it. I mean, that's all Danielle does. He does not have to talk to anybody. He does not have to forget about even asking that they not kill the wives and children. He doesn't have to do anything. Somehow that's a really poor role, even though, as I said, it's not nothing that you remain. He doesn't even say, I remained faithful, and therefore, if you could be faithful to God, you could be saved too. He doesn't do anything. It's not a role model for me.
No, he has extraordinary gifts, though. He can interpret dreams as no other person can, and he's loyal to the king, so he does serve.
And we're not finished with the story yet. Let's see where it goes.
No, we don't know. Maybe he meets a girl.
Spoiler, he doesn't. But this is really, I don't know, for others who are Bernie, Moshe, Carol, I guess others who've been following along the story, you want to weigh in here on these characterizations of Daniel? Does this feel relevant? Does it feel significant to you? Are we missing something?
Well, he represents something. He is a role model that he is loyal to his faith and his people's traditions, and is also important and high up in the monarchy.
Yeah. Right. So it's interesting, sort of like there's this idea in the activism world, or maybe other worlds too, of like called staying in your lane. Right? There are people who are amazing party planners or event planners, and there are people who are incredible organizers, and there are people who are great at writing And there are people who are great at backroom relationships, and there are people who are great at putting flyers at every restaurant and on every street corner, right? And that, like, when you find your skill set and that you want to use that to contribute to a particular cause, like, we're not going to fault the person who's really good at getting people to show up to the rally. We're not going to fault that person for not being able to then write about it as an op-ed in the New York Times, right? We say, well, there's somebody who's really good at writing op-eds, and there's some people who are really good at getting people to show up to the rally. And sometimes one person has both of those skills, but more often than not, each of us has different capabilities, right? There's very few rabbis who can do an amazing funeral and also write books. We happen to, Rav Avi happens to be one of them, but he's the exception, not the rule, right? Like most people who have the brain space to write books are not necessarily the same people who you want showing up, who are going to be able to, adeptly and compassionately show up for you in a moment of crisis. It's just not. It's not typically the case, right? And so one of the things I want to push back and say to Daniel is that we have all kinds, and maybe this is what Bev was getting at, which is we have all kinds of religious role models or Jewish role models, or the characters in Tanakh span, right? Samson has superhuman strength, and Moses is able to communicate with God, and Solomon, or King Solomon, is able to build and hold the the temple. He has the capability to muster the forces to be able to do that. And Elijah has this zealotry to get people to believe or have faith. Well, each of those are different qualities that different moments call for different sort of set of skills and capabilities. And our book is capturing Daniel, who has this unique talent, what Elaine was just saying, this unique talent of interpreting dreams and maintaining a high station as a Jew with his faith in a foreign government. And there's an important model for that, even if he's not also a social justice advocate or taking care of his children on his spare time, or maybe he is, but the text isn't highlighting those aspects of his personality or persona. People start seeing the way I'm presenting that. Does that resonate? Feel right? Feel wrong? Yeah, Miriam?
When you brought up Elijah, and I thought of Elijah and, currently Mattathias, these were fundamentalist fanatics. And when you take a look at Elijah, you see all the way through, he's a very volatile personality.
Yeah.
And he has no qualms about killing all those priests and those who were like the Chaldeans here. I imagine he didn't go after their children because it wasn't convenient or whatever, and maybe the optics weren't good. But 400 and so on dead bodies, that was no problem for him, and he was this loner. Whereas with Daniel, he's a much what McLuhan called a cool personality. He never loses his temper. He's always riding or above the fray, and he always handles it with aplomb. So maybe that's part of the story that was surprising.
Who did you quote? Sorry, who was the scholar you quoted about a cool character?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
You quoted somebody who described
Marshall McLuhan. Oh, I guess that's before your time.
Can you tell me about Marshall McLuhan? I'm sorry.
Is anybody familiar with the name Marshall McLuhan?
Yeah. The message is media, of course. That's it.
Showing your age, Ezra.
Yeah, we definitely are showing our age.
You don't know about him. I can't believe it. I guess we're old fogies now.
The media is the message.
Right.
You guys know about Kanye West? Have you heard of Kanye West?
Yes, I've heard of him too.
Sadly.
Kardashian.
I heard of him when
Kardashian.
but that's
point. The point is the media is empty. There's no content there. And our Torah is filled with content and nuance and teaching lessons. And most of the stuff that people read on Twitter and Instagram has no import and no content and no lasting messages, right? I mean, that's my feeling.
That's for sure.
Why we're still here learning. And they're not.
All right, Marshall McLuhan.
There
Okay.
is.
Yep, you see, we can look him up on Wikipedia.
Right.
He died before I was born.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we remember when that book was published.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it was a big media outburst.
Hot and cool media. Is what you're saying? Or is that a different thing?
No, that's something, I don't know. That's something else.
Yeah, he said that part of the reason that Nixon lost was that he presented too hot or too warm a personality, and people on television,
right,
which was a much more intimate medium, were uncomfortable by that.
Mm-hmm.
Sweating and had a beard, growing in front of people and stuff like that.
Well, actually,
Nixon in his first attempts.
In his debates with Kennedy.
With JFK, yeah.
He lost the debates because he was cold and officious and.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah, but also the thing about the Torah is these stories are very similar. They repeat each other and add new angles. You know, all the different meetings at the well, all the different dream sequence stories, all the different tests and struggles and fights. They add on to each other, right? To teach us things. I mean, that's what you've been doing with us.
Yeah. So I think it's I think this question, and I know that as we've been learning, it's a question that we regularly come back to of like, and I don't know if I agree with this question and Carol, I think your comment gets us there. I don't know if the question resonates to me of like, what's the point of this, or what am I supposed to take away from this? Right? Like, I don't think the Torah is a Aesop's fable. Do you know what I mean? Like I get nervous when we look at a character or look at a story and be like, and say, what's the takeaway? And then typically what that means is we impose or kind of draw a lesson that is typically reinforcing of a value that we already have, right? And that's like the, you know, like I don't know what the Torah is supposed to do. I genuinely don't know. And I think like as a community, or at different moments, we decide different things of what purpose the Torah serves, right? So like, and maybe a lot of it is context dependent, right? If I'm speaking after somebody has named their baby, right? And they gave their baby a nice Jewish name. And so I want to use the Torah in that moment to relate and contextualize the name they've given to their child within our religion, within our tradition, within our communal values. And so there I'm mustering the Torah to serve a certain kind of purpose in a communal setting. That might be different than if I'm giving a drasha, where I want to use the Torah not necessarily to affirm our values and commitments, but maybe to use the Torah as a counter source to challenge our values or commitments and say, hey, look, there's another way, right? But I think like I get nervous about sort of the Torah getting utilized as like I don't know. I think the Aesop fable is a good thing. It just feels cheap to me in some way, right? Like there has to be, the Torah has to be describing or capturing something more complex. And I think what I'm hearing maybe, and Carol, your thoughts are maybe like, think about this very explicitly here. Like when we read Daniel, one question we might have ourselves is, what is the Torah, what is this text trying to teach us? And I would say, I don't know what this text is trying to teach us. I don't know if this text is trying to do anything. The text is describing a text. So then the question becomes, well, what was the author of the text trying to teach their audience? Okay, well, that's going to depend a lot on who the author of this text is, who the original audience is, and that's a separate question. And if you recall from our first session, which is recorded and you can go back and listen to it, you know, the scholar who we brought in who was sharing about it was framing Daniel as being put in the context of sort of the right before the Maccabee time period. It was when the Jews were being ruled by the Greeks, and the book is here to assert some kind of way of dealing with or living under a foreign rule or foreign power, right? And so maybe that's sort of the purpose or the intention of the text. And then that question becomes separate from the question of, okay, why did Chazal choose to include this text as part of Tanakh? Which is a separate question from, why did we choose to read this text? And what are we hoping to get out from it, right? So I know, like, on a very practical level, we're doing it because, like, Bev came up with the idea and everyone kind of nodded their heads and got excited, and that was awesome, right? So, but like, I don't know, to me, I'm sitting with, what do I really, if I really understand the text, it's probably not going to be so clear what the takeaway or the purpose of it is, as much as what kinds of thoughts or questions or values does this text spur. I guess that's a little bit of like a broader worldview type thing about our Torah learning, but the questions and comments are drawing me in that direction. I don't know if Daniel is supposed to be a role model or supposed to capture what an ideal I don't know. This is a person who existed. This was how he was. What do we think about that? How do we react to that? How do we see that for ourselves or not? Carol and then Ellen.
You know, it reminds me, Devorah Steinmetz once gave a talk that the Torah is actually a genealogy book, and it highlights different members in that genealogy along the way. You notice how a lot of chapters end with a genealogy of a character that's no longer going to be talked about, especially in the sheet. And then she explained to us, you know, how the different characters that it does give stories about teach us different moral lessons about human nature and are part of our Jewish history. And so you can read, and it's also a book of laws. So you can read the Torah on so many levels, and I think that's why it sustained itself through the generations, and we're still studying it. Because it could be poetry, it could be law, it could be stories, it could be, you know, morality lessons.
Yeah.
And I think the character of Daniel it's also one of my children's names. It's a fascinating story how he stood up to the king and became powerful. But I don't think it went to his head.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of unique qualities to this character. It's interesting. I think I have. I feel very resistant to the notion of these stories as morality lessons, and I think that's about like how I interact with literature in general. Right, like the moral of the story is, right. That's not like a question I would think I would ask any of you in our context of our learning. And I think that's like a curious thing because people often will describe the Torah as a book of morals or of ethics, or teaches you morals or ethics. And yet I find that the stories lend themselves to a certain kind of complexity of human experience, much more so than clear kind of moral or value to draw from.
Yeah, I like that. It's nuanced. And there's no one wrong or right answer. It all depends on the situation and the context.
Yeah.
Right? And the personalities.
You know, there's a very relevant current story that just appeared on my Facebook or something.
You have Facebook too? No.
Yeah, Judy put me on. I don't write on it, but people write. Anyway, she wrote about her grandfather was in the concentration camp, And the Nazis took a bunch of people and say, convert and you'll be saved. Don't convert and you'll be shot. And he said, I'm not converting. And many who said they were converting, they got shot. So in a sense, without thinking about Daniel, I'm sure nobody had Daniel in their mind at that moment. There are those who will and those who won't, and the ramifications of each. He lived to be 94. The others were shot on the spot. So one never knows. You take, you don't even know where your values come from all the time. You don't know if it's from your parents, from reading, from a rabbi, from a friend, but you get your values. And there he was, you know, a young man from Hungary, and he not particularly religious, but he said, I'm not going down, not, you know, speaking later on, I'm not going down as a non-Jew. I'm a Jew. So it just appeared this week on my Facebook. His granddaughter put up this story, and
Wow.
I could see where Daniel is a role model. Take it or leave it. Take it now or take it some other. You don't know what circumstances you'll be up against. I do think that he certainly exhibits courage to face up, you know, when you're in front of a king, you pretty much agree with what the king says, because he has the power to lop your head off in a minute. But Daniel hangs on to what he believes. And I think we don't have to say, what's the lesson? That is a lesson. Be who you are. Just you know, that it happened this week, that this story came on, and the same thing. Of course, Daniel's reaction to other people dying. What can I tell you? I have all kinds of feelings about how the Germans should have been treated, how the Nazis should have been treated, and so on. And usually what convention has does not conform to what I think we made life much and death much too easy for them, for what they did. I mean, how could you, a person who was responsible for 4,000 or 40,000 deaths, how do you punish them? You know, how do you punish them? One cell at a time. So it's, you know, we all have to take away from where we get our values. And Daniel is a good one.
Very interesting. Bev, it's interesting to me, friends, that that this is sort of, this moment here is the thing that like trips us up for Daniel. I know Ellen was raising her hand and Miriam was as well. But like, of all the moments with Daniel, it's this moment right here where, you know, his adversaries' families are killed and Daniel seemingly doesn't seem to care. That is the moment where we're like, hey, like, who is this Daniel guy anyway? We don't really actually know so much about him. And I know earlier on we had described sort of Daniel as like the syndicated character, right? Every episode, it's a new episode. There's the king has a dream, and Daniel's here to save the day and show up with the prophecy. And like, oftentimes, right, we don't know so much about Inspector Gadget. We just know that he saves the day each week, right? You know, more modern TV has, you know, they try to complexify the Sherlock Holmeses and the Monk. Remember that show Monk? That was a fun show, right? Right, they try to like make these characters more complicated and more human. But the old school way is like, there's a problem, the detective shows up, solves the crime, next episode does it again, right? And a little bit that feels like Daniel, and somehow here seeing this reaction or this response, we're seeing maybe it's the the messiness or the chaos of the king's court, right? That he's in, that it's really cutthroat. He was thrown into a den of lions, he survives, and then his adversaries were thrown, right? Is raising for us how just highlighting some of this curious parts about Daniel. Ellen, and then Miriam, and then we got to wrap up.
No, I just wanted to say when you talk about lessons, and I kind of don't. I think of the Torah more as a recipe book that I pick and choose, which is probably not the thing to say in an Orthodox setting. But anyway, but Darius's lesson is that he trusted in his God, and God is all now we should all worship this God of Daniel's, because he's the living God. He's the one who sustains everything. That was Darius's lesson from it. You know, whether it's our lesson or not, what Darius takes from this is that God is all powerful, that Daniel's God is all powerful. He delivers, he rescues, he works signs and wonders. He's the living God, and his kingdom won't be destroyed. That's what Darius takes from it. So we may not know what anything else, but that's what we know. And I guess when I said, to me, that's what Torah is, a recipe, it's more like, you know, some people really measure everything. You know, it says a half a cup, you put in a half a cup. Me, if it says put in a half a cup of wine, I just take the bottle and I pour until I've had it looks good, and then I'm finished, you know. And if it says put in oranges and I don't have oranges, I put in something else. You come out with it at the end. But Darius is looking at it one way. And I guess maybe that's what Beverly is saying, that this is what Darius takes from it. That because he trusted in his God, we now know that his God is all powerful.
Yeah. That's interesting, right? We see sort of the Darius response here as an important sort of conclusion of the text, which is that, you know, totally swayed by these events to say that, you know, Darius is that the God of Daniel is legitimate and significant and one we have to contend with. Which is like interesting because, you know, just in contrast with the last 5 chapters, right? Daniel's been on this high horse this whole time. Not high horse. Daniel's been saying this whole time, God is the king, accept God. Nebuchadnezzar's like, okay, sure, maybe, yeah. Okay, fine. And here, what is it that allows Darius to buy in? It's actually Daniel being saved, similar to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah being saved, right? Their conviction is a funny word. Their conviction to accept the conviction of the king and go in and then be saved is ultimately more impactful, right? Those actions are more impactful than any kind of prophecy or dream interpretation, right? The conviction to stand up for your faith is witnessed and seen and is so much more impactful than someone telling you what to think or what to believe or how to be. And I think that's very, very powerful.
It also seems to be more powerful than the destructive power of God, because he doesn't even mention, oh, and by the way, we threw these other people in and they perished.
Yeah.
So it's not even the destructive power of God. It's the being true. It's trusting in God.
Yeah. Very interesting. Miriam, final word. Thanks, Ellen.
Actually, two things, if I may. I don't know that we have to be concerned that we're only looking for one meaning. I think many of us realize that there are multiple meanings, and sometimes there's even no meaning at all residing in a lot of these stories. The other thing is at times the curtain is drawn back, and we see the skeletal structure of this particular, I don't know, parable or allegory. It's not real. You have these figures who represent certain things, a hero who has no faults, a king who is a little bit more involved. He has no problem throwing his maybe half his bureaucratic advisory group into the lion's den. I mean, the things don't cohere, and I don't think we're meant to take them at face value or at believable value. There are other things that we perhaps are meant to look at, and when they don't cohere, it's because we're trying to read too much of a human element or reality element into it, and I don't think it's always there.
It's interesting, Miriam. That's a good place to stop. Right, there's like some sense in which, right, when you read fantasy or sci-fi,
Well, you drew the parallel. You introduced it in terms of those weekly adventure stories that follow a mold, a formula.
yes,
So, and the formula is that the hero can do no wrong, or at least not so much in current stuff. But here, this is an infallible hero.
right. It's the Lone Ranger saving the day each week on the show, right? And so, like, in this other kind of context, I think it's a very but is it pure entertainment? Is it pure sort of
Not when you have people dying.
right? But if they're the villains, then it's okay for the villain, right?
Well,
Or not if they're women and children,
are
right? Not if they're spouses and children. So these are really good questions to leave us with and stop with, but I do have to go. Bev, can we talk a little bit later? My next meeting is right now. And we'll touch base.
When do you want to talk?
Can I call you like? I don't want to give an exact moment, but maybe around 2:00.
Sure.
Okay.
Anyway, I think we say go ahead.
Okay, great.
Okay, that's the bottom line. Not 100% supportive, but we'll talk. But
Okay.
go ahead.
Sounds good, Bev. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Shabbat shalom and happy Thanksgiving and
Happy
Hanukkah
Thanksgiving.
Sameach.
Right.
Chag Sameach. All Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, everything's coming. All right, I'll see you all.